I'd recently decided to start doing 30 days of learning or improving something I was already doing. So with that, I decided to take 30 days of photographs to learn how to use my camera better. So here's the premise loosely. Take pictures for 30 days without any framework or objective and adapt and improve as it comes to me or as I was moved to investigate and expand. One exception being I'll try and use bracketing for exposures. Day 1. I hadn't used my camera in a long while, no tutorials or manuals. I just decided to head out and start taking pictures with whatever training tips and tricks I'd accumulated over the years and could remember. I started off on automatic and then slowly switched over to manual and tried out different settings, but quickly jumped back to automatic as I couldn't change controls fast enough or know what I was doing to take pictures. One thing I noticed while editing the video is that including almost every single photo is not feasible, so I had to decide to pick only relevant photographs. Some even if they weren't perfect in the classical sense but felt good, others for maybe capturing the changing nature of our environment. And I soon found out that being selective was rewarding and that it was relatively easier than I had thought it was. Day 2. I wasn't feeling up to doing much, but I had to be somewhere, so I just took the camera along. I haven't looked at any guides or tutorials or even particular features or settings for my camera. I only managed to get a handful of photos. The shots with the bright sky resulted in brightness issues as I'd switched to manual mode, but the focusing was still auto, so I'm guessing the contrast issues messed up the auto focusing somehow. For the indoor shots, the camera was switched back to auto again. Day 3, went out and started actually writing down exposures and f-stops, which quickly turned into a hassle and slowed down taking photos, especially since I wasn't quite sure what I should have been doing. Got a lot of very good photos and subject matter. About 3/4 of the way through, I realized that I didn't have my memory card in the camera. Wonderful. I decided to head home and call it a day as I'd spent a good deal of time walking around the city and gotten really good non-existent shots. Day 4. Started off with a few shots at home. Turned out my Xbox controllers aren't the prime subject, especially with the low lighting. Also, they were a bit grimy. Played around with the exposure a bit and went out on the beat. Started to realize that the LCD viewfinder might not be the best representation of what might actually be captured. This, I believed, was especially true in bright shots while facing directly towards the sun. Followed somewhat the same path as day 3, aka the lost day. Tried to retake the shots, but it wasn't as inspired, nor could I capture anything of interest or quality. Day 5, I didn't go out and just took a few shots at home, photos that is. Loosely played around with the f-stop and exposure settings. You can see some of the bracketing shots I've done, but without a stable base and having to change settings meant some oddly framed and angled shots. Some of the photos are taken at the same setting, just a varying amount of sunlight coming in caused variations. Day 6, didn't feel like going out today, but forced myself to stick to the plan whenever I can. Overcast with slight breaks of light and a bit of drizzle. I really like the lighting on days like this. The wind and water drops on the lens, not so much. I'm trying to get into the habit of just going and taking photos. One thing I noticed was that today I was actually slowing down and observing my surroundings, trying to identify good subjects or shots. Previously it was more of trying to walk somewhat at my usual pace and taking shots here and there unless something really drew me in. I was less concerned with people and more about taking photos. More focused than before, more oblivious to anything else. Some okay shots but couldn't get good framing on any shot in particular. Almost everything looks flat and uninteresting. Day 7. Very little. Day 8. Most often the hardest part of photography is actually getting up and out and taking photos. Started saving a few videos online for general photography tips and hints. One quick thing I found out was the histogram, which gives you an idea on the light levels in the scene and what the best range is. At the time I started using a little meter on the lower right of my LCD screen. It looks like a light meter. I basically adjust the f-stop and exposure settings to get towards the midpoint of this meter. This seems to give good results unless if you're looking at a shot with the really blown out section. For example, a subject against a very bright sky that takes up most of the frame. In this case it will try to reduce light levels until the sky is properly exposed, which leaves the subject very dark and underexposed. So now I use the light meter as a guide in most cases and then use experience and intuition for other scenarios. And I also use less bracketing shots. Day 9. Another indoor session. This time high contrast photography. Not a lot of shots, but impressed with the composition and in fact that lighting enables. Day 10. Before heading out, I looked up a few tutorials for my camera. I've included the link to one in the description. First photograph seen are ones I took while waiting out the rain, which had started when I left. Soon after, I headed to the park and played around with the light meter trick for balanced exposure metering. I managed to get some interesting shots even with the backlit sky, some close-ups, bokeh effect using what I've learned from the tutorials, and later that night some okay but sharp shots. All in all, a good day. Day 11, just stayed home and all I got were these dusty Xbox controller shots. Day 12, another day at home. The doldrums of life has put a kibosh on taking photos. Just put my feet up and not much else. Day 13, trying to shake the cobwebs of life off my mind, I ventured out, but not before watching a YouTube video which clued me in on how to best use aperture and ISO, which added to my aperture finesse. Also got a very good tip on adjusting exposure compensation settings to get a better picture in bright light. I've been playing around with the aperture shutter speed this time with a better sense of what I'm doing, plus the light metering. Using the ISO tip, I was able to get really sharp handheld shots while indoors with low light levels. I've noticed that I'm more methodical and patient when taking photos now. Also, I'm more deliberate and walking at a slower pace, taking in more things as I walk. Day 14. Just managed to get out and take a handful of shots. Nothing changed since the last few times. Apart from off days, I've also noticed that some of the things I learned don't stick as well as others, especially if not followed up immediately. And not recording or otherwise codifying what I'm learning, as well as not doing this consecutively, means less retention overall. Day 15. No advancements, and arguably the leanest of all days, at least in terms of subject matter. This will conclude part 1 of 30 days of photography. As can be seen from the last day of this video, as well as some others, not all days have interesting locations or subject matter. But that, I suppose, is the nature of this exercise. 30 days of exploring, experimenting, and learning. At this point, I'm more comfortable with manual settings, but the skills and knowledge I'm learning are far from cemented after just a handful of days of using them, or when there's a lapse between days. Also, I don't have a framework of what to capture or document as I go along, so this whole experience is an exploratory session. Another point is that the quality and amount of photos I take have a high correlation to how I'm feeling. With that, how inclined I am to venture out and try new things. The next part will have the remainder of the days, and with it the learning and uncovering of what I can achieve and how I progress. So stay tuned for that, and if you like this video so far, please hit like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.